All right, welcome. How is everyone doing? Well and dry, I hope. I don't know why the weather suddenly turned on us like this. I guess it truly is fall now. So welcome to the Genetics and Human Diversity in Tokyo Global Seminar Information Session. I am your host, Lisa Armstrong. I am the Global Seminar Coordinator here at UC San Diego Study Abroad office for this program. And I'm very happy to tell you all about the various logistics and everything like that. I am joined by the faculty, Professor Stanley Lo. And I'm just going to talk about a handful of logistics for about 10 minutes here and then turn it over to him. I go first because he's the main event. And I need to make sure you hear all my information though. So we are recording. It will only be shared with students who registered for the session, not publicly searchable. So that's just a heads up. Any questions you ask on quote unquote on camera will be included in the recording unless you specifically need us to take them and ask us to take them out after the session. All right, so first, just a couple of reminders from me. Hopefully most, if not all of you, have watched the general information session. Those watching the recording, please go watch that first if you haven't, because in that we cover a ton of logistics in detail, including the timeline for global seminars, the application pre-departure phase, as well as going abroad. The application process and what's necessary for that, budgets, financial aid and resources for that. And then we had the Zoom general session a couple weeks ago, but we're going to have an in-person one as well in our dance hall. I'll let you know where that is later. And thank you for the first person to introduce themselves. So you can come to the general info session in-person version at the end of the month. One of the most important reminders I want to share with you and reiterate from that general information session is that you review the cancellation and policy and withdrawal deadlines before you submit your application. Application isn't even open until November 1st, so you have plenty of time to do this now. But basically, you can see the grid I've pulled up on this slide. Be aware that after our withdrawal deadline of March 1st, you will be charged up to the full program cost. So just be aware, do not be surprised. However, if your program gets canceled, you won't be charged anything, and the $250 deposit will even be refunded. That's the only get out of jail free card, as it were. Otherwise, please be aware of the financial commitment. It really only affects probably about 1 or 2% of applicants, but it really impacts them. So we like to be upfront about it. So let's get into some program specifics. So from that general session, hopefully these buckets look familiar. So the program cost for that middle purple bucket is still being worked out. However, I do have a range for you for this program, and that's about $5,800 to $6,300 for that, specifically for that program fee. So just be aware of that. That will include housing, classroom, all of the excursions, both access to them and any transportation, as well as a transit pass for the entire 5 weeks around Tokyo. It includes insurance and on-site support as well. I'll be upfront that it does not include meals, but food is relatively cheap in Tokyo compared to California. As I already mentioned, applications open November 1st. Quick refresher on this. A placeholder, we do accept placeholders for your transcript, your passport, and your health clearance. And for this program, no travel clinic is needed. That's just an FYI. Before I talk about prerequisites, I want to emphasize that the health clearance is 100% not meant to be a burden or a barrier to study abroad. We just need to make sure that all of the participants have had those conversations with a health professional. So we are not health professionals in this office, so we are not making any decisions based on what you put on that form. So please be upfront. It really just helps ensure that anything that you've got going on that you and your physician or nurse or what have you will address anything you've got going on, whether it's physical or mental health, and also that anything you might have is that you're fully supported while you're abroad, both physically and mentally. For the prerequisites, there are quite a few for this one. It's BICD 100, Math 11, BILD 1, and either BILD 2 or BILD 3. Many have all three of them. If you are not a biology major, depending on what your major is, there might be an alternative course you can take instead. Particularly, I think for Math 11, if you have a different requirement that you can take and have already taken, just let me know and we can discuss what's feasible. For the visa and travel registry, ultimately, it is the student's responsibility to obtain a visa or any travel documents necessary. We do obviously require you have your passport in order to be approved. Again, it's not meant to be a barrier, just like the health clearance. We just need to make sure you got it or you're in the process of getting it. For US pass holders, you do not need a visa for this program. You just show up and they'll give you the ability to stay for 3 months on a tourist visa in Japan. If you do not have a US passport, there's a lot out there, so it depends on what country your passport is from. Again, it's your responsibility to get that. I can help, our office will help provide some support documentation in March. It's too early to do it anytime before that. And then also for non-US pass holders, please check with the whoever's coordinating your situation. For international students with an F1 visa, that's going to be ISEO. If you have a different visa or green card holder, you check with your sponsor or lawyer. And I'm talking about getting back into the country. They can't help you apply for a different visa. Sorry, my mouse is very sensitive. I really shouldn't use it at all during these. Quickly, we have some upcoming events, and I want to let you know how to contact us. The first is here, the Study Abroad Expo will have many resources focused on study abroad, all in one place. At Town Square next Thursday on October 23rd from 10 to 2. There's a really great question in chat. Thank you so much. So for these prerequisites, if you finish you just need to finish the prerequisites by the program start date. You do not need to have them completed when you submit the application. So you need to plan to be able to finish them by the end and pass them by the end of spring. All right, of this year. Thank you for that question. All right, more events. For financial aid, this is Eduardo Magayan. He's a study abroad financial aid counselor. So he works officially with financial aid office, but only and dedicated to study abroad applicants. We are so lucky to have that position in general, but to have him in the position. You will notice that there is one of him. There are many of you. So we ask that for a one-on-one, which is actually next slide, that you have it narrowed down to 1 to 2 programs before you reach out to him or request a one-on-one. And to do so, he asks that you submit a question via the Financial Aid and Scholarships Office. You can see we have the Contact Us button and then where to submit a question. And then there's a drop down, you can select study abroad and that'll go straight to him. But I went too fast and jumped right past the actual sessions. So he's got a GS specific financial aid session coming up at the end of the month, right before our deadline. However, there's also a recording from last fall quarter that you can watch if you're a little eager and don't want to wait until October 29th. There's also a couple of other more general study abroad financial aid sessions that will include some global seminars, but won't be dedicated to them as much. And how to reach me or any of the other staff at the Study Abroad office. Primarily, we advise via the Virtual Advising Center. There's usually, there should be a drop down that says Study Abroad, and specifically Study Abroad-Global Seminars, unless your college got rid of it or something. So by selecting that, it sort of fast tracks it and gets to me that way. If you just do a general VAC question, then first your college advisor has to review it and then forward it to us. So you can just select Study Abroad and it'll come straight to us. You can either ask, using the VAC, you can either just ask questions or request an appointment if you're not available for the drop-ins, which are Monday and Thursday from 1 to 3 p.m. and then Fridays from 10 to 11:30 a.m. If you feel like it's if your question is rather particular to this program, I'll let you know that usually, but not always, I am at the drop-ins on Thursdays because we split them up between the GS advisors. But for example, this week, I am not going to be here on Thursday, but I'll be there both Thursday and Friday of next week. So we like to keep you guessing just a little bit. Just as an FYI, I want to let you guys, I want to highlight our event space whenever we have an in-person event, perhaps in the pre-departure time. So you can see the map above. Here's the amphitheater to the side where it says us, how to reach us. That's essentially the Price Center. You can see Gilman Drive and the Gilman parking structure. So hopefully that orients you. Oh, and for VAC, I forgot to mention, if you are a non-UCSD student, you'll reach out to just our email, globalseminar@ucsd.edu, since you don't have access to the VAC. With that, also thinking of non-UCSD students, please note that you're not eligible for financial aid, so you need to reach out to your own office. Sorry, you're not eligible for UC San Diego financial aid, and we don't have access to any of your details. So you'll need to reach out to the financial aid office on your home website. Just let them know you want to do a program, at a summer UC program that's just pricier than a normal summer. Any logistic questions, especially any in chat that I missed? If I'm not able to finish my prerequisites, will the course fee be refunded? No. What we'll do is we would accept you on the condition that you will be able to finish all the prerequisites. If you don't, you will not be able to participate, but you will still be charged that program cost. So be prepared for that. Be aware of that before you submit your application, that you're ready to really rally and get good grades in those courses. That was a good question. Thank you. Okay, there's another one. Was the estimate from that first early slide? There we go. That 6 or 8K from the whole program. No, I recommend watching the global seminar session that highlights how we break down the different programs. This is just the program fee is going to be in that range. So there's also, in addition to that, is tuition, and tuition and program fee are what will be billed by UC San Diego. And then personal expenses like plane tickets, meals, passport, those costs you'll have to pay out of pocket to some other entity. Passport is most likely US government, meals to various restaurants and convenience stores there. It's plane tickets, airlines. So that's how that works. After submitting an application, is there a buffer period during which we can cancel for a refund? What if we don't get off the wait list for a prerequisite? Oh, yeah, if you get waitlisted, it's a slightly different story. Because our applications haven't even started yet, we're not really worrying too much about a wait list. But if you are waitlisted, you can withdraw before you get it, make it into the program. So if you're at waitlist 10 and you're like, I can't handle the ambiguity of this, I'll withdraw my application, you get the refund. All right.
So, sorry, Lisa, I think the question is, if they are waitlisted for a prerequisite course in the spring
Oh,
and
thank you
they
for
cannot
clarifying. Yeah.
complete the
Um,
prerequisite.
if you're waitlisted for a prerequisite course, what do you think, Stanley? Would they be able to reach out to that faculty and explain their situation and get permission to participate and permission to enroll in that course?
I think it would depend on the course and
Mm.
the exact scenario, but I mean, I
I
can't say for sure, right? Yes, that would be one thing you can do, but
I would recommend talking to I'm hoping you're a biology student, and or even if you're not, I would recommend talking to the biology advisor before you submit your application and find out. Well, let me take it. What were the courses? There we go. Yeah, since most of these are biology, I would recommend, and some need to be taken in sequence, I would recommend talking to the biology advisor and asking if they would be able to prioritize you on the wait list, given the situation and the financial commitment you're already on the hook for. But there's no buffer period. Okay, so we go back here. So you can see the dates in comparison to the status. So before March, so as long as you are an actual participant on the program, like you're either accepted, conditionally accepted, even in pending status, the $250 deposit is non-refundable. Again, I go into more detail on the general session. So this second administrative fee balance is the other half of an admin fee. So together there's a $500 admin fee. And this deposit, the $250 deposit at the time of submitting your application is just half of that. And it sort of just goes towards that. The program fee, this crazy amount, is it will not be charged if neither of these will be charged if you withdraw before March 1st. But after March, starting March 2nd, you'll definitely not get a refund. You'll definitely be charged at least $250. Depending on when you withdraw, you might be able to get something back. Also, this program does tend to have a wait list. So if you withdraw and somebody else can take your spot, like there's still someone on the wait list, then you will also be not be charged the full program cost. But that $250 deposit is still non-refundable. Excellent. How many people will be accepted to one program? There is no real average. It's up to 28. So all global seminars are 15 to 28 students. Okay, I think I'm up to date. Any other questions about these lovely logistics? So someone asked directly, can you go over the estimated cost? Please go watch the general information session. If it is full and I'm on a wait list, will my feed be refunded? The non-refundable deposit, no, that will not be refunded, but you won't be charged anything else unless you make it into the program. And that happens automatically. All right. I am going to, basically at this point, if you feel confident about participating on the program, hit submit. If you don't, maybe wait a second. Yeah, it's first come, first serve. All right. For all of the questions, we're gonna postpone those until the end. I would love to turn it over to Professor Lo.
yeah, not a problem. I think there's one more question. Doesn't it open November 1st, which I think is correct?
Yes.
Lisa, you can confirm, right? Yeah.
Yep, opens November 1st. So you have some time to decide whether the financial commitment is worth it, and to review that general session. All right, feel free to ask some more questions in chat. I'll respond to them as I can.
Yeah. All right. So I think you can see my share screen here. Let me just get
Yes.
all the technology set up. Super excited to share a little bit more information about the program here. In going to be in Tokyo this summer, genetics and human diversity. So that's sort of my very bad graphic attempt at combining a couple of things here, right? So you can see Mount Fuji and Tokyo Tower, along with the Tokyo cityscape in here, overlaid with a structure of DNA and some graffiti paint color in the background, which is actually my Zoom background here as well, right? So really, right, as Lisa mentioned, we're going to be working together in the program on two courses, BILD 60, which is Diversity, Equity, Inclusion in Human Biology, and then BICD 102, which is Genetic Inquiry, right? So that's sort of where the combination of genetics and human diversity comes from. And we essentially, the two courses are highly intertwined. And so what we're really doing is looking at a number of very broad scientific and social scientific questions together, right? So the first one's really thinking about science and society. How can we use understanding of genetics to contribute to equity and justice in human health? So there's a couple different papers, primary literature papers and stories that we're going to be working on together. The next one is model organisms. So what, if we study the genetics of pigmentation in fish from model organisms from across the world, what can that knowledge tells us about genetics and human evolution, right? So using fish and different fish model organisms, what we can learn about human evolution. And then the last one, we sort of circle back to human diversity. So how is sort of genetics, right? The concepts and constructs of genetics, how are those used and often misused in public discourse in relation to ancestry, migration, and racism, right? So one of the first topics that we'll sort of be looking at is the sort of both the technology and the biology and genetics of how the pulse oximeter works and how it has inherent biases across different racial and ethnic groups. So I don't know if you've used these before, but essentially, right, you can see here, it's a little clip on the finger where there's some, right, light-based technology through sort of light refraction that allows you to measure oxygen saturation in the blood. And so you can imagine, right, because it's light and, right, it has sort of, people have different pigmentation or level of pigmentations, right, that could potentially interfere with how the light works. And so depending on how the technology was developed and tested, right, there's some potential inherent biases there. And so what we're going to do, right, together is to read a number of papers related to these ideas and how it has potential really important implication in human health, especially this is sort of much unearthed or surfaced during the COVID pandemic as increasingly, right, people both have these at home and also have sort of as quick measurements in hospitals about who gets, treatment sooner or later, right? So funny story, I got two of these at home now because during the pandemic, I thought, well, I was exposed, right? Like I went out to some meeting on campus and I was told somebody there had COVID and I got tested and things like that. And then, I got one of these to clip on my finger at home to see how my oxygen saturation was, and it was extremely low. to the point that I was supposed to be hospitalized, right, based on the numbers, but I was totally fine. Right? Like I was working out at home and it was not a problem. And so I got a second one to make sure, and it was still pretty off. And so I coincidentally around the same time, one of my colleagues who's in Minnesota at Carleton College, and she was like, by the way, did you know these things are way off? And she also works in sort of she works in sort of biochemistry and equity in human health, right? And so that's sort of where I first learned about how how some of these biases are built into the technology, and sort of with firsthand experience, right? Another sort of interesting thing is that the original technology, that the sort of light technology that allowed ultimately for the development of this kind of pulse oximeters was actually originally developed in Japan. And so it was some additional, right, connection to the global seminar location. And then in terms of model organisms, right, so Medaka is actually a little fish in rice fields that are very common both in Japan and across multiple countries in the surrounding area. And so what's particularly interesting is that it has become quite a useful model organisms for people studying a variety of, function and physiology, using Medaka as a model organisms with really good sort of genetic tools. So you can do a lot of genetic manipulation in Medaka and be able to study sort of form and function and evolution and things like that, right? What's interesting is that despite being, quite a useful model organisms, I think it's largely only used, in research in Japan. So that's sort of an interesting connection. And this is sort of like a historical, much older artifact for sort of description of the Medaka fish, right? So you can see like, a couple of Medaka fish in the box here, and then on the right-hand side, those are goldfishes, right? So you can see a little bit of how they are different. We're actually also going to be, in addition to Medaka, we're going to also be looking at how goldfish is actually used as a model organism as well, increasingly. Originally they were bred for sort of collection, right? Sort of different body function, mostly, I guess, body shape and color, right? For sort of aesthetic purposes through a variety of domestication, right? And so, but in modern day, right, people can actually go back and say, now that we have this sort of diversity of phenotypes, right, then sort of use goldfish as a model organism and sort of try to develop or adapt some of those genetic tools to be able to study biology in the goldfish, right? Just as a comparison, depending on what type of biology courses you are taking or have taken or other experiences, right? You might know that zebrafish is actually quite a big model organisms for fish, right? In genetics and in molecular cell and developmental biology as well. You can see they're pretty similar in size and shape, right? But obviously they're also distinct fishes. But zebrafish is actually a sort of model organism that's used worldwide, right? And then so that's sort of an interesting comparison. In past years, not every year, in some year, we've also read a couple of papers related to cave fishes that are along the coast of Mexico, and those sort of, in addition, have interesting comparisons and similarities and differences, right, across all the different model organisms of fishes that people use across the world. The last part, right, is about sort of human ancestry migration and how genetics is related to that. So this is sort of like the global journey of how people have migrated across the world, right, over time, over quite a long time, right? Here the longest time we have here is 200,000 years ago on this 200 to 200,000 years ago on this map, right? So we'll talk a little bit about global migration as well as migration of people within the United States, as well as in comparison, right, how sort of migration of people into the islands of Japan have constituted sort of genetically, right, constituted the modern day population. We'll also be reading some papers on both genetics and anthropology of indigenous populations in Japan, including the Ainu community, who are mostly on the northern parts of Japan nowadays, and then the Ryukyuan people, right, who are on the southern part on the islands of Okinawa, and sort of thinking about how both the genetics migration and colonization and oppression happens, right, in the Japan context versus North American and global contexts. And then we have a couple sort of program-long projects, right? One for each course. So one of them is really thinking about diversity and human health. So this is one of the excursions that we'll be doing to to a museum called Miraikan. Lisa, I don't remember what the name is in English. I think something like Museum of Technology and Innovation or something like that.
Great question. I don't remember. But
Yeah,
I'm
I
very
mean it's
familiar.
fine. It
National
is.
Museum of Emerging Science and Innovation.
There you go. Yeah.
I was able to join. I got to do a site
Yeah.
visit 2 years ago and got to join Professor Lo's group to Maraikon. And it is a fantastically engaging museum, very, very interactive, quite a lot of exhibits that are interactive.
Yeah, it's an excellent museum. They have many floors, and in fact, what's interesting about it is every other floor is, well, you don't know that. You just like when you go in as a visitor, like you can go from like the first floor to the third floor to the fifth floor, and then you're like, what happens to the other floor, right? But it turns out, right, they in fact have on-site um, research labs built into the museum, sort of on the other every other floor, and they invite university and industry researchers to set up shop there for like a few years at a time to do really focused research projects, and then some of those research projects are turned into exhibits, right? So one of them is here. This is the one about cells in progress, and is really about sort of stem cells and sort of reprogramming, right, adult somatic cells into pluripotent stem cells, and how we can potentially use those as personalized medicine and stem cell therapy for regeneration and other kinds of potential interventions for human diseases. So there's like a number of scenarios in these little booths, right? And so part of the assignment is to go through a number of these scenarios and really engage with sort of decision-making processes based on a combination of the science, the sort of context of the scenario, and additional sort of intersection of like social, economic, and cultural considerations for how one might make a personal decision, right, as a patient, right, in the case of these case studies, to undergo a certain experimental treatment or not, right? And so those are really fascinating scenarios. There's a number of them. And so that's sort of like one of the two major course projects that we're going to be working on. The other one is a little bit more open-ended. So, you know, a large part of both courses is really learning how to read primary literature research articles and how to both learn to read them and learn sort of biology from reading, right, primary sources. And so one of the other, right, the second course project is going to be working in groups together, where you get to identify a topic of your choice and look up, you know, some focused number of original research papers, and then convert, right, that information into a much more accessible format. So Frontiers is a family of research journals. In fact, the University of California library system has an agreement with them. So not only do we have a subscription, but also we have an agreement where any UC person can publish, once it goes through the peer review process and gets accepted, right? But any UC person can publish a paper in some number of Frontiers Journal, not all of them, but a subset of them for free without sort of publication fees. So that's sort of like a UC-wide agreement with the Frontiers family of journal. Right. But so one of the course project is then to develop sort of a draft of a potential manuscript article for this Frontiers for Young Minds journals, which is one of their journals with sort of scientists writing for a younger audience. And they also engage young people as peer reviewers in the process. So there's sort of multiple sort of ways to really connect what we're learning, right? Both to different cultural contexts, and then in this case to different audiences. Here's a number of excursions sites. I also have a list, so I'll talk through them briefly in a minute. But you can see most of it is concentrated in Tokyo, and then we will go a little bit south to the Kamakura and Enoshima area. I think for an overnight trip this year, but not everything is finalized. So all the excursions are conditional, so things may change. But last year we went on an overnight trip there, and the year before we went on a day trip there, right? So that both are possible, right? And so I have some photos to share, just to showcase what previous students have done. So one of our first excursions within Tokyo is actually going to the Institute for Nature Study, which is almost like a natural reserve system. It's like this really gorgeous green space in the right literally in the middle of the city. And it's sort of dedicated for bioconservation, education, and research purposes, including public use, right? So this is very similar to the natural reserve system that UC campuses have, right, within the state of California, but this is, managed slightly differently. And so that's one of our field trips, one of the first ones. And this apparently, I don't know what this is, but apparently is supposed to be pretty rare. And none of the students knew what it was either. There was this much older gentleman there, Japanese gentleman, who didn't speak any English, but apparently he interacted with the students. I wasn't there. I was at a different part of the natural reserve. But apparently this older gentleman, according to the students, right, was, a frequent visitor to the Institute of Nature Study. Like he's there every day, every other day, taking pictures of all the creatures. And he was trying to explain to the students that this is one of the rarer sort of creatures that you can see over there, right? We've also been doing like a number of more social events together. So this is the 4th of July barbecue that we do. Obviously, it's not a holiday in Japan, but there are sort of places that we can also still do some celebrations sort of in a cross-cultural way, right? So there are no hot dogs, right? But there are other kinds of barbecue food, right? This is actually a photo from Enoshima when, the trip to further southern part. We're actually going to by the ocean to go to one of the aquariums, which has a really phenomenal like deep sea exhibits and a variety of marine exhibits. One of the plus sides of going right out that way is on a good day. This is a photo that I took separately on a trip that I went on my own some years ago. So not on the global seminar trips in the last 2 years. But on a good day when there are no or fewer clouds, you can actually see Mount Fuji. across the ocean, across the bay, basically. And here you can also see like people surfing. So there's a lot of sort of big surf culture in that area as well. So it's pretty interesting connections to San Diego. This is MiraiCon, right, and the stem cell exhibits. This is me interacting with students, right, on one of the exhibits. I think, Lisa, you took this photo when you were on the site visit with us,
That
right?
is entirely possible.
Yeah,
I was
and
trying to take a lot of action shots.
yeah, and I mean, I don't want to see, sorry, I don't want to show, right, like other students sort of faces without permission, but you can see their finger right on the other side there. Um, so those are sort of some additional pictures. I'm going to share my other screen, which is very briefly talk through.
We have a couple questions in
Okay.
chat. I'll answer while that's getting pulled up. One, do you need to know Japanese to go? No. It is pretty easy to get around Tokyo without knowing any Japanese. I recommend you do learn some basics to communicate, but you should be fine. And the courses are obviously in English, although Professor Lo does know quite a bit of Japanese. I'm always very impressed. And then there's some questions about the schedule. Is that what you're about to talk about?
Not in that detail, but I'm happy to answer those. If you want to answer, yeah, why don't we answer those questions first?
Yeah. So do we have any days off during the weeks? Usually, I think you usually give them a 3-day weekend, right, Professor?
I think right, so we have, I think the schedule in the last couple of years is Monday and Wednesday classes.
Mm-hmm.
And then usually we have, some weeks we have Tuesdays and Thursdays excursions. Actually, most weeks we have Tuesdays and Thursdays excursions, and then, right, you would sort of have a 3-day weekend. Some weeks we have like Friday stuff, and obviously if we do the overnight trip, I think that was
Mm-hmm.
like a Friday, Saturday, right? So it's not like every week you have a 3-day weekend, and then some weeks we might have like an overnight thing. We also honor the Japanese Marine Day national holiday, which is a Monday, right? So I think one year we had a 3-day weekend that way, right? Which was Saturday, Sunday, Monday. And then last year we actually had a 4-day weekend because it was one of those weeks where we had excursions Tuesday, Thursdays, and then people had Friday to Monday off, and people planned a lot of, I think like half the group might have gone to like Kyoto on their own or something like that, right? So the schedule is not fully fixed, but in general, right, it's Monday, Wednesday classes, and Tuesday, Thursday excursions, plus maybe sometimes, right, like a Friday excursion, depending on schedule.
And so we can give you these generalizations. We wouldn't recommend making too many plans. We wait to solidify actual days because sometimes some museum might be closed on a given day we had originally planned to go. So we try and keep it a little bit flexible until much closer to the program start date. There's a question for you. You mentioned a combination of DEI and genetics. Will this count for the DEI requirement?
I think we're still working on the DI course approval. Campus has been slower in processing them in recent years. Technically, I think BILD 60 was originally approved as a DEI course, but the global seminar version needs to be sort of reapproved, basically. So
Yeah.
we're working on that. 102 should count as a bio elective, upper division elective, yes. But if you have specific concerns or questions in relation to your major, you can check with the VAC and the biology advisors.
Mm-hmm. Or your major advisor.
Yeah.
And I want to readdress the question about what if you get waitlisted for a course. I feel like that hasn't happened yet. I haven't had any students reach out to me and say, hey, I couldn't get into this prerequisite. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. It's a good question to ask if you're if you think it's been It's been difficult to get into those classes before, but it might be fine.
Yeah.
You arrange your so departure, you're on your own for travel. We need you to arrive by certain days, and then housing ends by a certain date. But other than that, the actual travel dates are up to you.
Yeah, so I think people, right, like you're supposed to arrive by this day and leave by
Mhm.
some other day, but a number of students have chosen in the past to either arrive early for reasons and or depart later for, other reasons, right?
Yes, you have to take both classes.
Oh, sorry, did I miss that question?
That was a direct message.
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah. There's another, can I vote? We do an overnight stay in Hakone,
Oh
please.
yeah, I answered that directly.
Okay, yeah.
Let's talk about side trip. You can talk about side trips once in March. We won't need to do it here.
Yeah, so students in the past have done, their own trips, right, in small or large groups, right? A number of people have gone to Mount Fuji. Um, Lisa, I don't know if you remember, we at one point we had a version of the program there was like a Mount Fuji Hakone
Mm. Oh, I
excursion.
couldn't remember if you went to Hakone or somewhere else.
That was part of the Mount Fuji
Mm.
Hakone, like sort of overnight kind of excursion, but then I think we ultimately decided that the Hakone excursion places are all outdoors, um, sort of in like salt marshes and all kinds of places that I think July would be a little too much for. So we ended up not doing that. But you're right, again, like Lisa said, you're welcome to go on your own, right? In small or large groups as just on your own. Yeah.
All right. Oh, a few questions just came in rapid succession. Professor, was there something else you wanted to add about the courses you pulled up this?
Oh, I
Um,
mean, yeah, is it still being shared on screen or yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I can go over it quickly, but essentially this is like the reading list, right? So it's a bunch of different topics that we're going to work on. And then I have a list of excursions, which is also on the course, not the course, but the program website. So I'm happy to chat about these separately if people have questions, but there are lots of interesting places, including museum visits, right? Natural reserve visits, and also a number of university visits that we have sort of cultivated connections with in the last few years, right? Um, and in fact, I think a couple of people applied to graduate programs to some of these places because they visited. And then I think I had office hours this morning, and one of the students from last summer, like a couple months ago, came by and said that they're going to apply to like a summer research program at one of the places we visited last summer as well. So there's additional, right, like um, really nice connections that you might make on the trip. And then last summer we added like right, the overnight trip to Kamakura with additional cultural activities. That's also related to some of the course content because we're looking at sort of history of human migration and in relation to the changes in culture in Japan, right? So we also get to see some of that history in person as well. I mean, not in terms of time travel, right? But sort of artifacts of history, right? Of through the cultural activities.
All right. I've been answering some questions in chat about that we've sort of addressed previously. Oh, there's a couple. Is the course letter grade? That's the default. You can opt to take it pass either of the courses, pass, not pass. But I would encourage you to consider whether that's really necessary. A lot of students actually do quite well on their global seminar courses. And then obviously, if you're taking it for to fulfill certain requirements, in that case, you may not want to because then you won't get the right credit for it. But that's up to the departments and majors. That's not a global seminar policy. That's just guidance. Is it likely that AP statistics can exempt the Math 11 prereq? if you somehow do not fulfill it by spring. That depends on your major. If you are a biology major, no, they're rather insistent that those with the variety of biology majors take Math 11, because I don't think the AP statistics exempts you from taking it in general. So if you get permission from the biology advising team, then I'm happy to pass that along. I'm happy to agree with them. Is this trip recommended for particularly upperclassmen bio majors, or is it just anyone who has finished the prerequisites? We're happy to accept anyone who has finished or will finish the prerequisites before the program starts.
Yeah, I mean, so this is just gauging from past participants, right? Like we've had, I mean, I think because of the prerequisites, it's been largely third years, right? Majority third year maybe. But we've had like second year students, right? Like people even going into their second year, for example, have gone on the program. We've had like bioengineering majors, anthropology majors, right? Which gives also like a really interesting complementary perspective to some of those, right? Like human migration and ancestry questions that we wrestle with in the course, right? From a different perspective. So, I mean, I think because of the prerequisites, it's, you find that likely, right? Or at least in the past, right? The majority of students have been maybe upper class, so upper division, right? Like, biology majors, but that's not a requirement, right? And we've had a number of really great students from, from other years and other majors join. That's really enriched the program as well.
There's a question I do want to answer live. What is the chance to get a scholarship? So first of all, I don't have those statistics, but I will also, we've had plenty of students who utilize financial aid be able to get some grant funding for their summer global seminar. There's only summer global seminars. We don't have any quarter programs. They have been able to get some grant money, and then have had to fill the gap, because there is always a gap between grant funding and what the actual cost of participation is, with scholarships or loans. So scholarships are not guaranteed. And honestly, funding is a little rough this year. We just unfortunately got word that one of our scholarship funding sources does not exist anymore. So if you heard about the Oasis scholarship in the past, unfortunately, that is not available. So make sure you have a backup resource in case you don't get a scholarship, especially because most scholarships are announced after that March 1st deadline. I hate to be so negative, but I also want to be just very upfront and honest with you when you guys are planning. It's so sad when people have to withdraw because they didn't fully consider their financial situation and how they might pay for the program. Don't put all your, all your eggs in one basket, because eggs are also expensive. Is this program run every year? Same classes and location. So it has run for the last 2 years, and then this next summer will be the third. That said, the exact programs that Global Seminar offers every summer can change a little bit, but as long, I suspect that if Professor Lo wants to run it again in 2027, it would be, we'd let it run again. But I can't guarantee anything until like next June. So that's not very helpful to you.
Yeah, there's a whole process where, faculty submit proposals and then it goes to like a campus committee, right, that reviews them. And then I don't know, Lisa, right? Like some decisions get made based on a
and
variety of
then
factors, right?
just to really give you an idea. So we had, I think, 40 applications, 40 programs proposed, and we were only able to run 25. So, Yeah, there, I won't go into any further detail.
Right. I mean, you know,
You
there's a
don't need all
number,
the behind the scenes information.
but there's like,
Hopefully not recorded.
right, yeah, but you know, it's a number of factors are taken into account
Mhm,
when decisions
exactly.
are made, right? Yeah.
Well, thank you all so much for coming. I'll end the recording here, and anybody who's been waiting to chat off the recording, feel free to stay and ask those questions. But otherwise, I'll see all your applications soon. Bye.
Lisa, is this usually the one where we do the how to be respectful thing?
No, that's the pre-departure.
Oh, okay. All right.
I trust that they all know how to be respectful on campus.
Well, yes, that's true.
The recording is Milo. So yeah, Milo, the recording will be sent within the next week. The first week, so we might be running a little ahead, if anything. But please be patient with us.